Hey, and welcome back to Ronnie the Reader. Today, we're going to be starting a little bit of a small series on the channel where I'm just kind of reflecting on my reading over the last year, but also taking other years into account, basically doing a little bit of a reading audit and kind of examining what tropes and things do I like in some of my favorite genres that I read quite frequently. Today, we're going to be starting with romance, which is a newer favorite genre, I would say. I got a Kindle as a Christmas gift, an early Christmas gift from my fiance at the end of last year. It was like November. And so I just kind of went on a tear reading a ton of like Kindle Unlimited romances for like all of November, December, and January. We're now kind of here at the end of February, and I've kind of slowed down a little bit, and I've taken a little bit of a break from reading in the month of February as well, and that is not abnormal. I normally do read a ton in January and then read very little in February, so I'm not like pushing myself to read or like in necessarily a slump. It's just kind of my typical pattern that I do. But today, as far as analyzing things, I want to analyze some romance tropes and subgenres that I really enjoy and just kind of identify what I do and don't like, and kind of just give you a little bit of a piece of that data that I've collected over the last couple of months. Of course, this will be ongoing as I dive deeper into romance. And yeah, so let's just kind of get started and start talking about some of the books that I've liked and some of the tropes that go along with some of those books. So last year, I gave a couple of books 5 stars. The two that really stick out to me was Make the Play by Lucky Hart and Ancient Languages by A.J. Truman. And then there is a bit of an outlier, Maybe We Can Fake It by Tammy Sabia. All three of these I did give 5 stars. And then there was some 4-star reads in there as well that I also really enjoyed. I really liked Singing Sands by C.L. Blossom. Hashtag Holiday by Lucy Lennox I enjoyed. And I read a ton of N.R. Walker as well, like a maybe probably like 10, between 10 and 15 N.R. Walker books over the course of the end of last year and very beginning of this year. And basically, what a lot of these books that I've rated highly have pointed out to me or shown to me is that I really enjoy a very low angst contemporary first story. Very, relationship driven plots, emotionally intelligent characters, typically characters who kind of already know their identity. We'll get into a little bit later, but I'm not a huge fan of the gay or bi awakening trope of like first relationships with men. Fan of that. I enjoy for people to already kind of know that identity, their identity about themselves. Not that there's anything wrong with books that explore identity, because obviously everyone who is on the LGBTQIA plus spectrum does have to go through that identity, phase of kind of figuring out where you land, and not that you need a label, but being anything other than straight or the norm, you do have to go through a little bit of a discovery phase. But as far as what I enjoy reading, I don't necessarily enjoy reading that phase because it can be very emotionally heavy at times. And just for my romance personally, I don't necessarily love heavy emotion in that sense. Obviously, emotion and intimacy between our characters, I'm really here for, and really connecting and opening up with each other. But as far as the coming out, potential homophobia kind of situation, I just don't necessarily seek out. If it's present, I'm not like instantly going to DNF a book, but it's not something that I actively am seeking out as far as like some of the like tropes listed for a particular book. Some of the kind of explicit tropes that I enjoy, but maybe don't always work for me. One I want to talk about is fake dating, and that is going along with the Maybe We Can Fake It. This book was really surprising because normally I'm actually not a huge fan of the fake dating trope. Something that I've said in a couple of other video reviews of romances I've done in the past is I enjoy my romances to be hyper realistic, and we'll get into it, to tropes that I typically don't reach for. Things like paranormal, I don't necessarily go for, but just because I need that realism to really buy into the relationship, which is kind of odd because I've read sci-fi and fantasy, and there's romances in those, and I don't necessarily dislike those, but I'm usually not reading those books for the romance or connection. If it's a subplot, like, it's fine, but it's typically not going to be something that I love as far as that story, because the world is so much more interesting and intriguing to me than the romance most of the times. But going back to fake dating, it's just something that can really be hit or miss. I just don't always love the execution of the fake dating trope, and it is a bit unrealistic. I think I've never known anyone in my life that has fake dated. And maybe it's just because people are not telling other people they're doing this, but it just doesn't seem like something that comes up in everyday life for people, or for me at least, I guess. And kind of going along with that, the friends to lovers or established connection. This is also kind of present in Maybe We Can Fake It. And I don't necessarily need this. I do enjoy a friends to lovers or established connection book. I think it adds a layer of the emotional intimacy that I was talking about earlier that will already be there. And so, that is a trope that, once again, I'm not going to seek it out, but if it's present, I do enjoy it. Like light proximity or forced proximity, I do enjoy that trope quite a lot. I think it creates for a smaller, more intimate setting and intimate story. And there are a couple of N.R. Walker books that I read that have like light forced proximity. For example, in not Maybe We Can Fake It, in Make the Play, that book you are reading about teachers who are, or actually, now that I'm thinking about it, romance languages. Oh, I'm saying romance languages. I meant ancient history, but also romance languages by A.J. Truman. Both of them I gave 5 stars, but in all of those, it's actually following teachers at the same school. And so, there's kind of that workplace dynamic. And, I guess you could classify that as a workplace romance, although I don't necessarily look at it that way, because I don't know if like traditional workplace romances would really, like, to me, you think of corporate world, but it technically is that. But the kind of light forced proximity, I did read a YA book by Robbie Weber that also had that kind of light forced proximity. And I wish that one played with that trope a little bit more as far as bringing our characters together on an emotional level. But I really enjoy that. And just kind of the like soft domesticity of the stories, of just kind of being in each other's orbit, being present, and not, needing to force anything, letting it kind of go natural, and just kind of coming together in a really interesting way, and kind of moving on to some tropes that are a little bit more hit or miss sometimes for me. In enemies to lovers, I don't necessarily love like rocky relationships. Singing Sands by C.L. Blossom is a little bit of an enemies to lovers romance. The two characters don't necessarily love each other. At first, upon first meeting, it's a little bit of a tumultuous relationship at first. Well, not tumultuous, but I guess antagonistic. They like to push each other's buttons. And that, once again, is a little bit hard to miss. I don't seek out an enemies to lovers just because I feel like it can be a little too far for me. But if it's done lightly, I'm not against it. As far as tropes that I actively kind of avoid or dislike, I guess you could say, definitely things like dark romances, mafia romances, heavy like trauma focused stories, as I said, paranormal or like Omegaverse things. Also, books about like fame or famous people, I'm not a huge fan of. Kind of examples of that sort of trope, like The Charm Offensive. I wasn't a huge fan of that book, and a lot of it had to do with the reality show element, which I don't necessarily enjoy books about reality shows, just because I personally am a huge reality TV consumer, specifically reality dating/competition shows, and these are formatted in a very specific way. And I hate when the author is writing a book and there are very simple things that you would do as part of these shows, but yet it's treated as like a big deal. And it's just like, well, you wouldn't have gotten this far in the process if you didn't know that was coming. So that's a side tangent. But yeah, also sports romances again are hit or miss. I know they're having a really big renaissance right now after already being big with the whole heated rivalry hockey romance of it all. I don't dislike sports romances in the sense that like I'm not going to read it specifically because it is a sports romance, but again, going with the fame of it all and just kind of the toxic masculinity And also, if I'm being realistic, specifically with the hockey romances, and we're seeing this a lot right now with everything going on between Heated Rivalry and the men's USA hockey team, I'm sorry, there's just a lot of homophobia in these places. And it's just something that, like, I know that these men would not be as supportive of these other men in a relationship. It's simply not the truth, as much as I wish it was. And I just can't bring myself to suspend my disbelief enough to enjoy them a lot of the time. And I don't enjoy reading about that, like, alpha energy, that, like, kind of dom sub fem kind of situation. Like, I'm just not into reading that. I enjoy reading partners who are emotionally available and open to each other and share their, even if there's like a little bit of like kink necessarily in the sex scenes for these romances, I'm okay with. But I don't love the, like, just straight, like, I don't want to use the term like BDSM, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm explaining myself well, but yeah, that's just elements. There are elements of some of those books that I just don't like. And ultimately, just kind of analyzing some of these tropes in some of these books that I've enjoyed or maybe not enjoyed as much. I really am just like a soft, comfort, cozy male romance reader. The low angst, the low drama, the two people coming together and just kind of falling in love is really what I'm here for and what I love to see. A little bit of a surprise for the end of this video. I am trying to explore some of the genres that maybe aren't necessarily my favorite. With that, I actually am in the middle of a paranormal romance. It is a vampire/vampire hunter book. And I read the first like 40 to 45% of it about a week ago, and I haven't picked it up since. And I was enjoying what I was reading. It wasn't like bad necessarily. I just haven't been compelled to go back to it. I will finish it. It at this point probably will be a 3-star for me, but I am happy to explore it because of all of these genres that I've discussed that I'm not necessarily a fan of. I think paranormal probably could be the closest one that would work for me. Paranormal, fantasy, supernatural elements, because I think a lot of the times it can be very closely, set in the kind of real world or like an urban fantasy kind of setting, but hopefully doesn't have those like tropes that I don't enjoy of like the toxic men, the kind of mafia dark romance kind of stuff. Usually are not going to be super present, but I'll kind of keep exploring. But yeah, this video was very rambly. I'm so sorry if it really doesn't make any sense, but please let me know down below some of the romance tropes that you enjoy, and if you have any good romance recs for books that are similar to ones I've talked about here that I liked or that have tropes, or if you want to recommend me some paranormal slash supernatural romances that you think I could try to dive into that subgenre and enjoy as well. So yeah, that's everything for today. Once again, so sorry it was very rambly, but thank you so much for watching, and I hope to speak to you down below in the comments, and I will have another video coming soon. So until then, I will talk to you later. Bye.